You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story is from a solo hunter that went looking for elk in Idaho and found something else instead. Footsteps in sync with his own and a chest-rattling huff that echoed through the trees. And this is the story of what Micah experienced on Cuddy Mountain, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we got the privilege of talking to Micah today. Micah's an individual that reached out to me after listening to episode 769 specifically, which is the Idaho bear hunt turns into Bigfoot encounter. And Micah is an individual from out there in Idaho, had an interesting thing happen, and he's here to share that today. How are you doing, Micah? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeremiah. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, we were talking a little bit before the show. This is definitely going to be a fun one. Some really interesting things talked about. I think this is in maybe I don't believe the show has gone to this area yet, so maybe a new area in Idaho. But you know, I'm gonna go ahead and pass things over to you, Micah, and make sure that you've got the time to share what you need to today. So feel free to take us back to when this experience happened to you out there in Idaho.
Yeah, for sure. So I agree with you. I've not heard many stories out of this area, and even like looking at the Bigfoot mapping project, I did that about 6 months ago, and there's not a ton of sightings in this area. For reference, the area is just outside of Council, Idaho. It's a teeny tiny little speck on the map. It's like a 700 population town, tiny town. But it took place kind of like I was saying earlier near Cuddy Mountain and Summers Peak, and I was on a game trail. But I was getting into archery hunting. I'd gotten into it a few years prior and gone on a few hunts, and I had been looking at a map at work. I worked at a sporting goods store here in the valley, and for reference, I'm in the Boise area near the capital city. And I had found a spot. I didn't know much about elk hunting, and I just knew to find the deepest, darkest, nastiest looking ravine up on the mountain that I could find, and found one. And so I planned a day scouting trip. It was just one day, and I went up there, and it was just me. Not a great idea sometimes as a new hunter. But I went up there, I found elk. I knew how to get to them. So I went back up. It was either the next week or 2 weeks later, and this was in, I think, the second week of September in 2019. I don't know exact dates, but I had intentionally taken time off work in the middle of the week because there's a bunch of dirt bike trails in that area, and I wanted to try to be up there when people weren't ripping around on dirt bikes and moving everything around. So I had seen elk the week before. I knew how to get to where I could see them. I had a basic idea of where I wanted to be. So, you know, told my girlfriend at the time, hey, this is where I'm going to be. Told my family, told my brother-in-law, basically, if I'm not back in 3 days, this is where I'm going to be. This is where I'm going to be scouting from, just so I covered my bases if people needed to come looking for me. Anyway. And I had planned to be gone originally for 4 days. I think I left on Tuesday and was going to come back on Friday. So got all my gear together, went up there. I got up there right before daylight, hiked to my spot, and I was in my spot as the sun was coming up. And I did not see another living creature. There was no squirrels, no birds, no deer, no elk. I'd seen bear sign when I was in there scouting, no bear sign, nothing. It's like everything just disappeared. And I didn't know at the time, I didn't know any better. I didn't know that when it gets deathly quiet, it means there's something fishy going on. Because again, I'm basically a brand new hunter. And so I kind of hiked around and looked for a couple different spots, and like I said, I didn't see anything. So eventually hike around all day, and I'm walking out, and I just have my bow in my hand, and it is, I would say, deathly quiet, but that doesn't describe it. Other than the sound of my footsteps on the game trail, there is absolutely nothing. And so I'm just kind of walking and thinking about where I'm going to go. And then down off to my left side, I realize that there's another set of footsteps that's like close to matching me. Like it's off by just a little bit, but it's matching my steps. And my first thought is I'm being stalked, and I don't know if this is a mountain lion. I don't know if this is a bear. But either way, I am by myself. I am about a mile from my car. I'm in the middle of the woods and something's stalking me. And I was already scared because the guy that kind of mentored me in archery hunting for a little while had hunted this area and had been stalked by a mountain lion. So I know that this is a possibility. So I stop and I'm kind of listening, and there's no noise. It's not moving. So I keep walking. Oh, I'm sorry. My heart rate's going a little bit. So I keep walking, and it starts matching my steps again. And it's almost like an echo. Like every time my boot comes down, it's just a little bit off pace of me. So I stop again, and it stops again. And at this point, I'm like, I am in trouble. Something is stalking me. I'm in very serious danger. And so I take about 3 steps, and then I do a short step, and I catch it taking an extra step. And like I said, I'm archery hunting, but I had a pistol, just a 9mm pistol, more for sense of security than anything. And so I know it's not going to do a whole lot against a bear or anything like that, but at this point, I decide to turn and draw my pistol. And when I do, there is the loudest, most explosive, just that I have ever heard in my life. And it rattled my ribs like the bass at a concert. And the only thing I could equate it to at the time is bear. So I've drawn my pistol, I dropped my bow, which isn't a good thing. But I turn and I've drawn my pistol, and I'm kind of like leaning to the left and the right, just trying to see what's there. And the trees are so thick, I can't see anything. And all at once, it sounds like you let a bulldozer loose down the side of the mountain. Just a huge commotion. Branches are breaking, thundering noises, which now I'm assuming are footsteps. Just boom, 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 boom down the side of the mountain away from me. And I don't know how far it went. But I was so scared at this point, I can't even describe it. I'm horrified. So I stay there for, it felt like an hour, but it was probably a minute and a half, 2 minutes, just standing there, pistol ready. I'm shaking so hard I wouldn't have hit anything even if I had shot. But I didn't ever actually see anything. That's the hardest part about this whole thing. And eventually I pick up my bow, and I had a hook on my backpack. So I put my bow on the hook, and I didn't put my pistol away the rest of the walk out. And I think that was probably the fastest mile I've ever walked without running in my life. Back to my car, and I went home. I left. And I got back down to my girlfriend's apartment in the valley. And of course, I'm supposed to be gone for like another 3 days. And she goes, what happened? Why are you back already? And I said, I just don't want to be up there anymore. I don't want to hunt up there anymore. Didn't tell anybody for probably 7 years. I don't think I told anybody. No, not 7 years. It was in 2018. I think I told that story for the first time in late 2023. So about 5 years later. Because, I mean, I watched Monster Quest growing up. You know, I was the kid that loved Monster Quest, loved the Bigfoot shows, even finding Bigfoot. Anything I could get my hands on that was Bigfoot and monster stories, I would listen to that. And then in November of 2023, I started working for an Amazon delivery contractor and found podcasts, which are great when you're driving around all day. And I found another show, and there was a hunter who described almost word for word my situation. Walking out, being paced or paralleled or whatever you want, or escorted, whatever term you want to use for what they were doing, it was doing. Except for this guy, after the whatever it was huffed at him, a different one stepped out on the trail in front of him. And I was in the middle of somebody's path delivering a package, and I just froze. Because I was like, this is the only thing I've ever heard that describes what happened to me. And again, I never saw anything, so I can't say that's what it was. But I've never heard anything that ever equated to what happened to me. So that's pretty much the story. I know it's not the most riveting story ever, but man, I was scared. I was terrified.
It is really interesting, though, because as you're talking, I'm also thinking how many stories that come from hunters like this in Idaho that just my podcast has talked to over the years. And I know there's many other podcasts, many other Idaho stories as well, but it's very, very interesting, a pattern that seems, there's a lot of hunters having interesting things happen to them. And you had said that what you heard, it was like a huff.
Yeah, it was. I can't imitate it, but like I did that big just kind of noise, and man, it shook my ribs. It felt like, because I work at a concert venue also, and I'm a bartender, so I've been down working my bar, and there's a speaker 50, 60 feet away. And when that drummer hits that bass drum and you can feel it in your chest, that's the closest thing I can come to it. But man, it scared me so bad.
When you were up there, did you happen to notice anything else out of place, like any trees that looked weird or anything like that?
No, but I wasn't looking because I didn't know what I know now.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't know they do tree structures. I didn't know they'll knock trees over. I didn't know they do X's or the little teepee, whatever things you want to call them. I didn't know anything about that. Obviously now in hindsight, I wish I'd been looking, but at the time I was clueless.
Have you been to that area since?
No. I did not hunt there the next year. The girl I was dating, we broke up before hunting season the next year, and then life just kind of took me a different direction. And I have been back in the woods since, but it was a totally different area. And And that area also burned, I think, 2 years later. And I haven't been back there since.
Oh, the Cuddy Mountain area?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a big fire up there. But I don't know that I would go back there again, and certainly not alone.
Absolutely. I mean, just the things you hear that come out of Idaho.
There's some crazy ones.
I don't know if I would go hunting out there myself either alone. You'd definitely want to have a buddy with you. I mean, besides Bigfoot, just having the massive predators besides that. I mean, you mentioned
bears, wolves,
mountain lions. Yeah.
Mountain lions. Yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of goodies up here that a hunter can run into.
Just in case someone had not picked it up at the beginning, it sounds like you have you've looked into this area. After this, there's not been a ton of sighting reports or encounters in this particular area.
Yeah, not in this particular area. There are, ironically, so I grew up in a little tiny town that is just over the mountain range from Council, and it's a town called Cascade. It's in Valley County. And I remember when I was looking to see if there'd been any other encounters over by Cuddy Mountain, and there's been a few in that county. It's called Ada County, ADA. And there's a few other encounters in Ada County, but the county I grew up in, Valley County, it was either the most or the second most sightings on that website. And some of them were within 15, 20 miles of where I grew up. There's sightings at Warm Lake, which was about 30, 35 minutes away driving. There was sightings at Tamarack Resort. It's a really famous ski resort that's only about 20 minutes from where I grew up. So, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know this until about a year ago, but there's been a bunch of sightings in that area, which makes sense. It's in a huge national forest area. But that was a really intriguing thing to find.
That is very interesting. You mentioned, so thinking about things that you said, one way that this has affected you is you didn't go back hunting in the woods for a while, which is totally understandable. That
not in that area. Right. I did go. I think I went either the next year or 2 years later, but it was in a completely different area. It was like 5 hours drive time away from where I was at.
Gotcha. Now, some people will report that after they have some kind of an encounter like this, they'll have other weird things happen afterwards. Is that the case with your story as well?
No, I haven't had anything else weird happen because I live in one of the more populated areas of the state. So, I mean, it's one of the bigger cities in the state. So, unless Bigfoot's roaming the streets of downtown Boise, I haven't seen anything else weird.
I guess you never know. Watch. I'll get an email after this. Well, actually, it's weird. Now, I guess the other thing is sometimes individuals will have experienced things in their life prior to their Bigfoot encounter. Is that the case with you at all?
There is one other weird experience that I had. And it wasn't a Bigfoot.
Okay.
I don't rightly know what it was, but it was spring of my senior year of high school. This was April of 2015. March or April, I don't know. But I went to school in a town called Nampa, which is only about 20 minutes from where I live now. And I'd met a guy who grew up in Valley County also, and he knew a sheep herder up in McCall. And so we would go and shoot coyotes every weekend for the ranchers out here. And just a fun way to make some money for a couple of small town kids. But since we were seniors, there was one weekend that neither of us had a sporting event, and we had all our homework and tests done. So we got permission to skip school on Friday and go up to McCall and go wolf hunting for a weekend. And we were like, heck yeah, we're out. So we packed the Jeep. My buddy had a 2-door Jeep that we called the War Wagon because he had big tires on it, and that thing we had no business taking that thing some of the places we did. But we went up and we were kind of in between McCall and Brundage Mountain Ski Resort, which is only about 5 miles outside of town. We were kind of up in the mountains between McCall and Brundage looking because there was a sheep herder that he had lost 3 guard dogs, 3 big livestock dogs. It was, I can't remember if it was 2 Great Pyrenees and an Anatolian Shepherd or 2 Anatolian Shepherds and a Great Pyrenees, but like big livestock dogs that can defend livestock from any predators in the area. And he lost 3 of his dogs in one night to what he said was a single black wolf, a huge black wolf. And I think in 2012, they reintroduced wolves in that area. But there were Canadian wolves and there were gray wolves. There were hybrids. There were hybrid wolves that were enormous. Like I've seen tracks. I'm not a big dude. I'm only 5'9", but the tracks were almost the size of my hand. Wolf tracks. Just huge wolves. And so we were like, well, shoot, this guy's got a $5,000 bounty on a black wolf. Let's go see if we can get ourselves a black wolf, right? We're 2 18-year-old high school kids. We're bulletproof. So we went up and we found this little valley, and my friend had a rifle that his dad had done the legal process to get a suppressor on. And that thing, we'd killed so many coyotes with that gun. But normally he shot first. This time we had decided that I was going to shoot first, and I just had an unsuppressed AR with a scope on it. But we were both pretty good shots. We'd killed coyotes out to about 350, 400 yards before. So we set up in this clearing. We're kind of up in the trees on the edge of it, and we've got a big meadow in front of us. And we're sitting there just doing a few calls, predator calls. And all of a sudden, my buddy's sitting about 10 feet to my right, and I see him slowly kind of sit up and perk up, and he's looking through his binoculars, and then he pulls out his rangefinder, and he kind of leans towards me and goes, hey, about 375 on the other side of the clearing, right to left. And it is a huge, what looks like a black wolf. I mean, it's got the ears, it's got the tail, but it's massive. I had a coworker who had 2 big Great Danes, and this thing was as tall, probably as tall as them, but bulkier. So we had agreed that I would get the first shot. But what we did is when we were coyote hunting is we would both be scoped on the same animal. The first one would shoot. If we missed, second one would take a follow-up shot. And we've been successful doing that many times. So I scope in, and I've made shots on coyotes at this range, so I'm pretty comfortable. So I scope in, and I take my breath, and I fire. And I don't know if I missed, but that wolf creature took off like a rifle shot, man. It covered, I don't know exactly how far it was. I'm guessing 60 to 75 yards to the other side of the clearing in about 3 seconds. It was gone so fast my friend couldn't get a follow-up shot on it. And like I said, we were both pretty good shots, but he was a better shot than me. He was a crack shot. And he couldn't even keep it in his scope to get a follow-up. And then, so I just shot the unsuppressed rifle. That's probably going to scare anything out that's nearby. So we left. We came back the next day, and it had walked in front of a stump that I could see in my scope when I shot at it. And that stump came up to like between my hip and my rib cage. So I don't know, 3 feet-ish. And there had been a gap between the underside of that wolf's chest and that stump. So, I mean, that puts his shoulders at 4 feet, probably 3.5 feet to the bottom of the chest, 4 feet to the shoulder. And I don't know if it was just an exceptionally large black wolf or what it was, but it was one of the scariest things I've ever seen. The size of that creature and how fast it moved was just absurd.
It's a thing when you hear stuff like that, it really makes you wonder. And I don't get into a lot of things outside of Bigfoot, but I mean, on the one side, it's like, yeah, I guess there could definitely be wolves that big out there, but then on the other side, you're kind of like, man, I wonder if that could have been something else as well. I don't know.
Could have been something else. I don't know. Because I have heard stories of whatever you want to call it, whether it's Dogman. I know that's kind of a no-no word sometimes. But I have heard stories of whatever you want to call that creature only about 2 hours south of me, near a city called Twin Falls. And I did hear a story on another podcast about Dogman sightings there. So I don't know that that's what it was. That's kind of the most infuriating part for me in both of these stories, is that I don't know what it was either time. So.
Yeah, I was like, just as long, don't say, and then all of a sudden it stood up and ran. I'd be, oh man, dude, like.
Oh, I think I would have had a heart attack,
yeah,
dude.
Yeah.
As big as that thing was, I would have freaking died right on the spot if it had stood up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But same thing like the other guy that had that encounter that sounded like me, where the Bigfoot stepped out on the trail in front of him, and it was a different one. If a Bigfoot had stepped out on the trail in front of me, I would have had a heart attack right on the spot.
Yeah, the thing is like that's another pattern too. Is you hear that not only is it the one that you know about, but there's probably another one in the area too. And man, that's just it's even crazier. And hopefully in your case, there wasn't more than one. But the good thing is you got out of there, pretty quickly.
Yeah. I wasn't sticking around. To find out. Like I said, I think that's the fastest mile I've ever walked without running in my life. I was not sticking around because, like I said, I was by myself. It's about a 50-minute drive from the nearest town. And it's about 30 from the nearest main road. So granted, I'm not that far out as far as hunting goes, but I was far enough that I was like, I need to leave right now.
Do you have any thoughts about why Idaho might be a good environment for Sasquatch to be in?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you've heard any stories about Idaho, you've heard stories about like the Frank Church Wilderness. It's a massive section of national forest. I think it's about 5-6 hours north of me. So granted, it's a ways away, but just the whole state, relatively speaking, is forest. It's very heavily wooded. There are plenty of areas where there's not a lot of people. Deer and elk and cattle are all over the state. I mean, because we have Montana on one side and Oregon on one side. I'm closer to Oregon, but in eastern Idaho, there's part of the state line that borders Yellowstone. That's right on the other side of the state border from Yellowstone. So I absolutely believe that Bigfoot could easily live away from people and live well on deer and huckleberries and elk and fish. I mean, we have huge salmon runs here in the state. There's a town that I used to play sports against in high school called Riggins, and the entire industry of that town in the summer is salmon fishing in the spring and summer. I mean, that town relies on salmon fishing. So, I mean, there's remote parts of that river where I'm sure there's tons and tons of salmon available to, I mean, I know they're available to bears, so I would imagine that they could live very, very well in some of these big forested areas. And I actually have heard an encounter story from the Frank Church Wilderness. So I have no doubt that it's just a good, solid environment for them in some of those areas. So, long answer to a short question, but yes, there's food, there's cover. There's areas for them to hide where people probably don't go all that often, if ever. So.
Yeah, the Frank Church is, from what I've heard as well, it's a wild place. I do have an episode where I talked to another hunter. His name's Dan. It's episode 643 about a visual sighting he had in that area. Pretty intense stuff. Definitely, listeners, if you're into Idaho stuff, would definitely give it a listen as well. Idaho is not a state we talk a lot about, but it's starting to become more and more prevalent on the show, which is great. I know you haven't had a visual yet, Micah, but do you have any thoughts about what it is that we might be dealing with when we talk about Bigfoot being out there?
I thought I did at one point, like before I started learning podcasts and watching some of these documentaries, like Small Town Monsters. I know you love those guys. I love their videos. I've learned a lot from them. And my thoughts on Bigfoot kind of changed with the weather, man. Because this stories just vary so much. And I'm so glad you asked this question, but I'm going to kind of rant for a second. So there are some stories that sound just like another predator. They're hunting, they're killing deer, they're hiding from humans. But then you have other stories where there's something more going on. Because I'm a Christian, and I do, I've heard the stories about Dr. Ketchum's DNA tests. That one kind of convinced me that there's two, I think, granted this is all my theory, and I could be perfectly wrong, and I would be totally acceptable to that. But I think there is some sort of predator that we don't know about that is natural, that is Bigfoot. Because of some of those stories. Again, you hear them killing deer, you hear them taking livestock, raiding farms. But then you hear things that they just don't have an explanation. Track lines walking through snowy fields, and all of a sudden, tracks are gone. Now, is it possible that they jumped 60 feet? I don't know. We don't know anything of what these creatures are capable of. But I do think there are some that are more of a natural predator. Granted, I think that they are the apex predator in any system they are in regardless. But then I think that there are some that do have a spirit, something more of a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, aspect to it. So I do think some are a, a big bipedal predator, but I think there's others that are more. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, it does. My viewpoint's a little similar. It's, it's definitely some kind of physical creature because of, like, as you were saying, the stuff that it does. It chases down deer, it leaves footprints. But yet, I mean, there are accounts that I've taken where it is like controlling an orb or something like that. And the person that I'm talking to about that, like, I really trust this person. He's not crazy, like, it's just some really
they
interesting
seem like
things.
a credible witness.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
but then the other reason that I say I think they're natural is you have behaviors that are very, very similar to great apes. You have the chatter. There's a story that I heard where the guy is on a river trip with his son, and they hear what the guy says sound like a pissed off monkey. He said it sounds like a mad gorilla just chattering away. And then they're throwing rocks and throwing sticks. And that's all like documented primate behavior. But then other things, like you say, controlling orbs, the glowing red eyes. I don't know what that's about. I don't ever want to see that. But there's just so many weird things that don't line up. So really, I don't know. I hope we get answers in my lifetime, but I don't know that we ever will.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like, I'm obviously, one of my goals is, like, hopefully we do. Because, man, can you imagine, like, if there is a point where there's discovery, that there's going to be people coming out all over the place with, okay, now it's okay to share, now it's a thing where, okay, there it is on the TV. Although it's like, who knows? We can't believe video anymore. I mean, that's out ever since AI. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the stuff on TikTok, but you've got Bigfoot vlogging and
Bigfoot vlogs.
it's wild, man. You've got Bigfoot preaching. You've also got Bigfoot in wartime scenarios, all sorts of weird stuff, and
all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So I don't know if that's going to also move the needle with what is going to be required for proving it. I mean, anyone can make a video that is great.
Like you said, especially with AI capabilities now, I don't know that a video will ever be good enough for everyone. I mean, I'm not a proponent of pointless killing, but I think at some point, granted, getting in a little bit of conspiracy here, I think they have been killed. I mean, everybody who's ever spent any time listening to Bigfoot podcasts at all knows the story of Mount St. Helens, where they were pulling Bigfoot bodies off the side of the mountain with a helicopter, supposedly. You have stories of military units killing Bigfoot on military bases, because they got I think that they have been killed, but I think that a lot of times if it's a hunter, say it's a hunter that feels threatened and he shoots them, I think a lot of times they don't say anything because they're like, nobody's going to believe this, which is valid. There's so many skeptics still that will say, oh, well, Bigfoot doesn't exist. We would know about it by now. Would we? And granted, that's kind of more of a conspiracy angle on it. But yeah, I would love to see it proven and love to see it revealed. But I hope it happens, but I just don't know.
There's a really interesting video. I'm going to put it in the show notes. This individual on YouTube, he did a ton of research and listed pretty much every story that he could find from anywhere where there was a Bigfoot body said to have been found, or taking of a Bigfoot. And it's called I Found Every Bigfoot Body Location. It's very interesting. There's a lot of controversial stuff in there, of course. I mean, he even goes into like the conspiracy theory in where it's MK Davis and the Bluff Creek Massacre, which I'll personally say
way down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it is. That is one that I don't hold to, but he definitely did his homework as to listing it. I think maybe the one he may have missed is, and I've got to look again, but the Bugs interview from Art Bell. If you've ever heard that one, that's a great interview.
I haven't, but I'm going to go look it up when we're done.
It's a classic. I won't spoil it for you. It'll be a fun one for you to listen to. It's like Bugs, the Bigfoot hunter from Texas, from old Art Bell. It's good stuff. But yeah, I mean, I really hope that we're able to move the needle a little bit. Hopefully in the next 20 years, we'll hope that's been said over and over by different people in the community over the last, well, what is it, like we could say almost 100 years, because there's, you've got the pre-Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot stuff. But I think it's important definitely that individuals such as yourself are able to come forward to share what they've experienced, to put more things out there. And the way I look at it is, if, the different podcasts keep doing that with real and legitimate encounters, eventually the bathtub gets so full that it just overflows. And if let's say an organization has been holding stuff back, they have to be like, okay, now we have to address this, because this is as big a deal as the UFO thing now. So we'll see what happens. But
here's the other thing, and I heard this said on another podcast the other day. Bigfoot used to be a big deal, right? You heard about a Bigfoot sighting and you're like, whoa, like, what happened? But now I think that, with movies and Monster Quests and podcasts and books, and I think it's kind of gotten desensitized. Like, I don't think it's as big a deal anymore for people to, on the rare occasion that a Bigfoot thing shows up in the news, they're like, oh yeah, it's Bigfoot. They're crazy. Whoever saw it's crazy. That's my family's biggest arguments. They're like, those people are nuts. And I'm like, I don't think they all are. Because you have thousands and thousands of sightings every year, and only maybe, 2,000, we'll say 1,000, just for numbers' sake, that do get reported and get talked about. If even one is true, there's something to it. If even one out of that 1,000 is true, there's something to it. And I just can't personally accept that every single one of those encounters is a fake story. I think they are out there, but I don't think everybody's crazy that sees Bigfoot. I just don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're definitely not all fake, for sure. I mean, are there some potentially? Oh yeah, I mean, there's been hoaxes out there, but man, there are some that definitely are. And I mean, there are ones that I've talked to people off air that are just nuts. But I mean, for some reason or another, usually it's a thing where they're afraid of losing their job, or they're waiting until that they are retired, which is no problem. They're just waiting to be able to tell their story. And I hope that those individuals are able to share. There's some really, really interesting ones out there in the background. But
yeah, there is. And if even one person hears my story and is like, hey, I had something similar happen, even if it's not in Idaho, that's my thing, is like, I just want people to know that you're not alone in this. So maybe somebody will hear this and think, well, maybe I'll come out with my story now. Who knows?
Absolutely. And that's kind of the way it works. You tell about one area and then people are like, oh, I know that area had something happen. And it's kind of how it keeps going. But, Micah, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been, a great time, you sharing what you experienced. And I want to say thank you for doing that, but also a great discussion as well about different topics within Bigfoot. I just want to say thank you for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I love the show. Like I said, I drive for an Amazon delivery contractor, so there's always a podcast in my ears, and a lot of times it's Bigfoot Society. So thank you for doing what you do and giving me the chance to come on here and talk, and I look forward to a lot more episodes.
Hi, my name is Buck. I live in the Black Hills of South Dakota, in Rapid City to be exact. I have a story I wanted to share with you. This took place quite a long time ago. As you may or may not know, the Black Hills got mountains that range up to 7,000 feet, give or take, and it's just a beautiful and sometimes very rugged and remote country. Anyway, this took place a long time ago, and I haven't shared it with many people, but actually only my brother and my mother have ever talked about it. Would have been approximately 1967, and my parents and the three of us, my younger sister and youngest brother, to be exact, were going to stay at a cabin. It was a friend of my folks's. This cabin was in the Galena area, the Black Hills, and it's got a lot of creeks running through it, some real rugged country. Keeping in mind that this would have been year 67, and the Black Hills has changed tremendously since then. There's far more homes, people in the area now. I mean, it's vastly different from what it was then. Far more remote and a lot less going on. Anyway, we went to this cabin, and we'd been there before, and we just loved it. We did a lot of running around. There was lots of trees, always things to do, and some creeks or some runoff areas anyway. One particular creek that ran near the cabin was always a favorite of ours. And there was one bridge, small, homemade bridge that crossed the creek. Now, this isn't a big creek. This creek's probably 6 to 8 feet wide at the most, and probably 3 feet deep, give or take in some of its widest areas. However, if you're a young kid, it was a big thing. I would have been a 7, and my youngest brother, he would have been approximately 5. Whilst anyway, long and short, whilst running around by the creek, we got to an area. We were running across this log that crossed it, my brother and I, and it's so hard to explain. I saw something, and to this day, it's always on my mind. There was an individual there, and I say individual because, of course, I was 7, but he was big. I'd say somewhere 6.5, 7 feet tall, and black. And he was probably 30 yards from us, 25 to 30 yards from us, just standing somewhat behind a tree, but looking at us. My little brother wasn't looking at him at that point, but I was. And I just wondered, it was odd because we had been there many times and never seen anybody else up there. Anyway, as this was taking place, my brother, who was horsing around a log, fell into the creek. And he was, like, say, he's around 3 to 4 years old. And he was underwater. And I was looking at, and I was so scared between seeing this individual and suddenly my brother being in this creek. It was just overwhelming. I ran back to the cabin because I couldn't get him out. It was too far down from the log to reach down to the creek, and I didn't think I could get in to get him. So I ran back to the cabin, and the first one there was my mother, and I told her what had happened and that we needed help.
If you'd like to share a voicemail to be potentially featured on the show as well, head over to BigfootSocietyPodcast.com and hit the Share Your Encounter button. Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Micah's story is the kind that sticks with you, not just because of the sound that he heard in those trees, but for how close it came to something that we may never fully understand. So huge thanks to Micah for stepping forward and sharing this chilling moment from the Idaho backcountry. It's stories like his that remind us that sometimes the woods fall silent for a reason. If you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube or wherever you're listening. Tap the bell icon so you don't miss an upcoming episode, and share this one with a friend who's into hunting, Idaho, or just Bigfoot in general. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please hit follow there. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a positive 5-star review to help more listeners find us. And hey, if you've had a Bigfoot encounter yourself, I'd love to hear it. You can send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's talk. So thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there, and see you in the woods.